Good evening. I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to picture yourself standing in front of a doorway. Nothing fancy about it. No grand architecture, no dramatic lighting, no cinematic moment unfolding around you. Just a plain, ordinary door frame, the kind you might walk through a dozen times a day without noticing. But what exists on the other side of this particular doorway is anything but ordinary. On the other side is a life that actually fits you. A life shaped around the things you have quietly been longing for, sometimes for years, sometimes for so long that you've half convinced yourself the longing itself is as close as you're ever going to get. And here is what I need you to really hear. You are not walking toward that doorway. You are not somewhere down the road hoping to eventually reach it. You are standing at it right now, in this exact moment, with your hand already resting on the frame. Something brought you here tonight. Something drew you to these particular words at this particular time. That is not a small thing. That is not coincidence. That is you arriving exactly where you were meant to be. You might be sitting there wondering how that's possible. How a series of words, just words, moving through your mind in the quiet of an evening could carry the weight of something as significant as a turning point. And the answer is that the words themselves are not the turning point. You are. The words simply showed up at the moment when something deep inside you was ready to remember what has always been true about you. And what has always been true is this: the capacity to completely reshape the direction of your life has been sitting inside you since before you had any language for it. It was there before the doubts accumulated, before life taught you to lower your expectations, before you started looking at other people's realities and quietly deciding yours couldn't possibly compare. The power was there first, everything else came after. And no amount of time or disappointment or accumulated evidence to the contrary has been able to actually remove it. It has simply been waiting beneath the surface for you to turn back toward it. Think about every genuinely extraordinary thing that human beings have ever built or healed or overcome. Think about the institutions that now seem permanent and inevitable. The illnesses that were once considered death sentences and are now managed or cured. The ideas that were once dismissed as impossible and are now so woven into daily life that nobody remembers a time before them. None of those things began with the perfect resources falling into place. None of them began because external circumstances aligned in exactly the right way at exactly the right time. Every single one of them began with a thought. A single thought that lived inside a single human mind. A thought that someone held on to long enough and believed in deeply enough and felt fully enough that the world around it gradually had no choice but to begin reorganizing itself in response. That is not poetry. That is not metaphor dressed up to sound meaningful. That is the actual mechanism by which reality gets constructed. And it is not reserved for exceptional people or chosen individuals. It is available to you completely right now, tonight. Look at your life for a moment. Not with judgment, just with honest observation. Look at your circumstances, your relationships, the way your days tend to feel from the inside, the specific textures of what you experience as normal. Most people look at all of that and see an independent external reality, something that exists out there and that they move through as best they can, reacting to it, managing it, trying to improve it through effort and planning and persistence. But what if that entire framework is backwards? What if the life you see around you is not an independent reality at all, but a reflection? A precise, faithful, completely accurate reflection of your inner world, of your most consistent beliefs about yourself, of your deepest assumptions about what is possible for you, of what you genuinely feel you deserve and what you actually expect to receive. A mirror doesn't make decisions about what to show you. It doesn't soften the image or exaggerate it. It simply returns exactly what stands before it, without opinion, without editing, without any agenda of its own. Your outer world functions in exactly the same way. At every moment, it is showing you the current state of what you carry inside. Now sit with what that actually means. Because if the world around you is a reflection of your inner state, then the path to changing your outer world has nothing to do with working harder, or knowing the right people, or waiting for luck to finally break in your favor. The path is to change what stands before the mirror. Change the inner state, genuinely and deeply, not just at the level of surface thinking, not just by repeating optimistic statements while the ground underneath remains untouched, but at the level of actual assumption, actual belief, the settled, felt sense of what is true about you and your life. When that changes at the root level, the reflection must change. It has no other option. This is not a spiritual opinion or a philosophical preference. It operates with the same reliability and the same impersonal consistency as any natural law. The mystics and teachers across every culture and every century have been pointing at this same reality, just using the language and imagery available to their particular time and place. But beneath all the different vocabularies, the teaching has always been identical. What is invisible comes first. The inner creates the outer. You are not the effect of your circumstances. You are, at a level most people never fully reckon with, their cause. And I want to be direct about this tonight because the time for speaking about it in veiled or overly cautious language has passed. You are a creator, not just of the things you consciously intend and plan for, but of the entire landscape of your life. The things you want and the things you've been trying to get away from. The patterns that keep repeating no matter how many times you try to interrupt them. The experiences that seem to find you whether you invite them or not. All of it, every bit of it, is the external form of your most consistent inner states. That is a sobering thing to hear. It is meant to be, because it asks something real of you. But it is also the most genuinely liberating truth you will ever encounter. Because if you have been creating your current reality, even unconsciously, even from patterns absorbed before you were old enough to question them, then you can create a different one. The past is not a life sentence. It is simply what you built before you understood you were building. And creation can always begin again, starting from exactly where you are right now. The instrument through which all of this happens is your imagination. But not imagination the way most people use that word. Not daydreaming, not wishful thinking, not the pleasant mental vacation you take when reality feels too heavy. Imagination as the actual workshop where your future gets made. As the precise and powerful creative act through which everything that is first invisible eventually becomes visible. When you close your eyes and step into a scene, when you build it with enough sensory detail and enough genuine presence that it stops feeling like a picture you're watching from a distance and starts feeling like an actual place you're inhabiting, you're not engaging in fantasy. You are stepping into a state of being. You are becoming, in the only dimension where becoming first occurs, the person who already has what you desire, who already lives inside what you are reaching for. And here is the part that changes everything. Once you have genuinely inhabited that state, once the inner configuration is real and settled and complete, the outer world must begin rearranging itself to match. Not because you forced it or bargained with it, because that is the law. It cannot do otherwise. Let me make this as concrete as possible. If you woke up tomorrow morning and you were genuinely, actually from the inside, someone who experiences financial abundance as simply the normal condition of their life, not performing it, not pretending it, not telling yourself a story about it while privately feeling poor, but truly inhabiting the consciousness of someone for whom prosperity is just the ordinary texture of how life feels, what would that be like in your body? What would your first thought be when you opened your eyes? How would you move through the morning? How would you carry yourself? Can you feel the difference between that and how things feel now? Because the moment you can genuinely, fully, from the inside, step into that state of being, you have already begun the process of becoming that person. The outer world picks up on the frequency of your inner state and begins producing circumstances that belong to that frequency. This is not positive thinking. Positive thinking tries to change the surface while leaving the ground untouched. What I'm describing is a change at the level of the ground itself, at the level of the deep settled assumption, the inner knowing that doesn't need to argue with current circumstances because it isn't consulting them for permission. From that level, transformation is not something you hope for, it is something that becomes inevitable. But I need to be honest about something here because this is where the majority of people lose the thread. Some of you have tried versions of this before. You have visualized, you have written down your desires, you have said the affirmations and done the practices and worked to generate the right feelings and then waited. And the waiting stretched on longer than expected. And silence began to fill with doubt. And at some point, you arrived at what felt like a reasonable conclusion. That this doesn't work. At least not for you. Not given your particular situation and your particular history and your particular set of circumstances. To you specifically, I want to say something important. The limitation was never in the practice. The limitation was in where the feeling was actually coming from. Because the power does not live in the technique, it lives in the feeling. And not just any feeling, the specific feeling of the thing you desire as already real, already present, already yours. Not as something you are hoping might arrive. Not as something you believe could theoretically be possible. As something that simply is. This distinction is the entire difference between a practice that produces results and one that produces only the prolonged experience of wanting. A person can sit and visualize wealth in extraordinary detail, can picture the bank account and the home and the specific texture of that life, and underneath all of it, in the actual ground of their experience, be broadcasting the felt reality of someone who does not have enough. And what the world responds to is always the actual inner state, always the real feeling beneath the surface intention. The image without the feeling is decoration. The feeling without the image has genuine power. But when the image and the feeling come together completely, when the picture and the inner state become a single unified reality with no gap between them, that is when what you desire stops being a possibility and becomes a certainty moving toward you through the invisible. You have to learn to live from fulfillment rather than toward it. This is the practice of living from the end. It means treating your desired reality not as a distant destination you are traveling toward, but as a present fact you are already standing inside. Making what you desire not something you are pursuing, but something you already are. When you genuinely master this, when you can consistently inhabit the feeling of your wish already fulfilled rather than the feeling of wanting it to be fulfilled, you are holding something that will open every door you have been standing in front of, trying key after key without success. Now I know the question about action is going to come up because it always does, and it deserves a clear and honest answer. Should you take action in the direction of what you want? Of course. Action is part of being alive and engaged in your own life. But the quality of the action, the energy behind it, the inner state from which it flows, that changes absolutely everything. Most people act from a state of not yet having. They move forward out of lack, out of urgency, out of the anxious feeling that if they push hard enough and fast enough, they can somehow close the gap between where they are and where they want to be. There is a detectable quality to that kind of action. The world reads it as the movement of someone who is not yet sure they will make it, someone running towards something rather than from something. But when you have genuinely settled into the inner state of your fulfilled desire, when you have made the assumption real and lived from the end, your action changes its entire character. It becomes the natural expression of who you already are, rather than the desperate effort of someone trying to become something. You are not acting to get somewhere. You are acting because action is simply what someone in your position naturally does. That action carries a completely different quality. It is confident without any desperation underneath it. It is purposeful without the strain of someone who isn't sure the purpose is achievable. It flows from the inside out instead of reaching from the outside in. That is the difference between making something happen through force and creating something by allowing your inner reality to express itself in the world. Here is something practical I want to leave with you for tonight. As you move towards sleep, in that soft and quiet zone between waking and dreaming, where the conscious mind begins to loosen its grip and the deeper layers of your mind become fully open and receptive, I want you to enter into a scene. One specific scene, built with as much sensory detail as you can bring to it, that implies the fulfillment of something you genuinely desire. And I want to be precise about what that scene should feel like. Not the dramatic moment of receiving, not the surprise or the excitement of it finally arriving. A scene that implies it has already been real long enough to feel completely ordinary. A scene that would only make sense if what you desired were already simply part of the normal fabric of your life. Feel what it would actually feel like to live inside that scene. Not the feeling of wanting it, the feeling of having it. Let the image and the feeling align into a single complete inner experience. And then let sleep carry that state with it down into the deeper levels of your mind, the levels that do not argue with what they are given, that do not compare it against current circumstances, that simply accept what they receive as true and begin immediately building from it. Do this not once, not on the nights when motivation is high, night after night, with the consistency and the quiet patience of someone who understands that a seed planted in good soil does not reveal itself the morning after it goes in the ground. The process is happening underneath, in the invisible, which is where all real creation begins. Your only task is to keep planting, to return to that state again and again, and to resist the temptation to dig the seed up with doubt every time you don't see immediate evidence. The how and the when of how things arrive are not yours to manage. That belongs to an intelligence operating beneath the surface of things, one that can orchestrate circumstances and timing and connections in ways your conscious mind could never have engineered on its own. Your responsibility is singular and simple. Live in the imagination of what you want to be real. Hold that inner state with consistency and with faith, and let the process complete itself. Some of you will wonder about other people in all of this, about free will, about whether your inner state can actually shape how the people in your life show up and behave, given that each of them has their own consciousness and their own choices. This is worth thinking about carefully. What you perceive as other people, specifically your experience of them as they appear in your world, is deeply shaped by your assumptions about them. Not because they are puppets without agency, but because the reality you inhabit is colored entirely by your own consciousness. And the people in your world tend to show up wearing the version of themselves that your assumptions have called forward. When you consistently assume that the people around you are generous, that they mean well, that kindness is simply the default quality of human interaction in your life, you will find that assumption confirmed so consistently that it will feel like extraordinary luck, like you happen to be surrounded by unusually good people. But it isn't luck. You are inhabiting a consciousness that naturally calls certain responses forward and renders others essentially invisible to your experience. Assume the best version of the people around you, not naively, not by ignoring real information, but as a conscious creative act. Hold that assumption and watch how reliably that version of them appears. Now I want to speak for a moment to the part of you that has followed everything so far and finds it genuinely compelling, but also has a quiet skeptical voice running underneath. The voice that is asking whether it can really be this straightforward. If it were, why would so many people spend their lives so far from what they actually want? The principle itself is simple, the application is genuinely not. Because what the application requires is something most people find deeply difficult. It requires taking complete responsibility for the creative power that is operating in your life. It requires looking at your circumstances, all of them, the ones you're proud of and the ones you're not, and understanding that all of it is the outer form of an inner state. Not necessarily a conscious choice, but an inner state regardless. And that means giving up something that many people hold on to with surprising tenacity, the comfort of being a victim of circumstances. The story that external conditions are the primary reality and your inner world is simply responding to them. The familiar belief that life is something that happens to you rather than something that happens from you. That inversion is everything, and many people, when they truly grasp what it asks of them, pull back. Because familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar power. But you are still here. You have stayed with every word of this, and that is not an accident. Something in you recognized before your thinking mind could confirm it, that this is a moment when something actually shifts. So let me be clear about what I am asking of you. I am not asking you to pursue power over other people. I am not asking you to try to bend the world to the will of your ego or to use these ideas to manipulate outcomes in ways that serve only yourself. What I am asking is both simpler and more demanding than that. I am asking you to align yourself with the creative intelligence of the universe by genuinely mastering your own inner world. To become so deeply, so consistently, so authentically aligned with what you most truly desire, that the outer world finds itself with no real option but to conform to what you are holding inside. This is not about domination, it is about congruence. It is about becoming the same on the inside as you want to be on the outside. About living in your imagination and your feeling and your daily quiet assumption, the life you are in the process of making real. Here is the challenge I want to leave you with as you move forward from tonight. For the next 30 days, commit to this practice with the full, genuine weight of your intention. Choose one desire, one specific, real thing you want to experience. Not the most overwhelming thing on your list, the one that feels most alive right now, most genuinely wanted, most close to something your whole self can actually believe in. Each night as sleep approaches, spend real time inside the imaginal scene that implies its fulfillment. Make it sensory, make it feel lived in and ordinary. Feel the specific emotions that belong to someone for whom that desire is simply already true. Not the excitement of almost having it, but the settled, natural, quiet feeling of someone who has had it long enough for it to feel normal. Then carry that inner state as your private orientation through each day. Not announcing it, not performing it. Simply moving through your life from that place as your felt inner ground. When doubt arrives, and it will, probably around day 3 with considerable force, do not make war with it. Simply return, gently, without drama or self-judgment, the way you would step back onto a path you'd momentarily wandered from, not making an event of the detour, just resuming the direction. Do not occupy yourself with monitoring for evidence. Do not scan your outer circumstances looking for confirmation that the process is working. The evidence will arrive first in subtle internal shifts, a different quality to how you feel in the morning, a new steadiness underneath your daily experience. Then, in the slow, quiet reorganization of circumstances. Then, in the arrival, from directions you weren't necessarily watching, of what you have been holding inside. But the act of monitoring for evidence is itself a subtle form of doubt. It is the behavior of someone who is not yet fully sure. And doubt is genuinely the only thing that delays the process. Your only task is to live from the end, to be in consciousness what you want to be in reality, and then to trust the seed to do what seeds do when they are properly planted and faithfully tended. Carry this understanding with you as you move forward. Your imagination is not a decoration. It is not a pleasant side capacity you employ in the margins of your real and serious life. It is the most genuinely powerful creative instrument you have access to. It is how the invisible becomes visible. It is the mechanism through which all creation, in every dimension and at every scale, first begins. Use it with intention. Use it with consistency. Use it with the particular kind of love that isn't sentimental or soft, but is deeply practical. The love of someone who takes their own life seriously enough to imagine it into the shape it actually deserves to take. The changes will come. They always begin subtly. A shift in how you feel when you open your eyes in the morning. A quality of quiet confidence that you didn't plan for but suddenly notice is there. An opportunity arriving from a direction you weren't watching. When those moments come, receive them with the calm acknowledgement of someone who expected them. Because you did expect them. You planted the seed, you tended it, you gave it what it needed, and the seed is doing exactly what seeds do. As the changes accumulate, as the outer world begins unmistakably reflecting the inner state you have been patiently and consistently holding, stay with the practice. Not because you are still trying to force something into being, but because you have found the way of living that is most genuinely aligned with what you actually are, a creator, the author of your own experience. Someone who understands in their bones that the life meant for them is not somewhere out there, subject to luck and timing and the cooperation of circumstances. It is right here, already real in the imagination, already complete in consciousness, already moving through the invisible toward the visible with the quiet and irresistible momentum of a law that has never once failed to work. Your life is about to change. Not because something outside you has finally decided to cooperate, because you have chosen with full awareness, with genuine commitment, with the simple and powerful decision of someone who understands exactly what they are doing to change it. The doorway is right here. Your hand is already on the frame. step through,